I think it's really important to acknowledge this relationship between feeling bad about yourself because you're procrastinating and how hard it is to get started. Part of it is acceptance, but also giving yourself grace. Let's go. Hey, welcome back to the Pubcast. I'm your host, John Loomer, where I invite you back to the virtual pub and we get drunk on Facebook ads, entrepreneurship, video creation, man, AI, ChatGPT, you name it. It's a little bit of everything. Look, this show's been around for over a decade now, and it's evolved quite a bit, admittedly. So today we're doing things a little bit differently because, one thing I've been trying to do this year, in addition to these pubcast shots, is bring on guests, right? And we're going to continue to do that. But there was an idea that came to me today of something I just really want to talk about. And I think this, primarily applies, at least in my mind, for entrepreneurs, but solopreneurs, but it doesn't have to be. And really the focus today is going to be on procrastination. And the funny thing is, I guarantee I talked about this a few years ago, and I think I completely disagree with kind of where I was coming or where I was going with that at the time. We'll get to that. But because this is an actual pubcast, I don't really like doing this drinking alone, but it's a full episode. So we'll pour a drink anyway. And I'm drinking Thick Haze, Oscar Blues Brewery, New England style IPA. So the issue I've had with each of these episodes is I'll pour this and I do a horrible pour and then I have to wait forever. So looks like that's probably going to be the case once again. Yee, don't go all over. We almost spilled there. All right, so I'll even take a sip through the foam here. But if you've got a drink handy, it doesn't have to be alcoholic. Cheers to you.
Glug, glug, glug.
So yeah, we're going to talk about procrastination today because honestly, look, this is something that I've dealt with my entire life. That's my entire childhood and my entire adult life. And look, I get there's this perception of, I think for people who don't procrastinate, right, that this is a choice and that this is going to sound bad. This is a choice and there's laziness, right? And look, I'm not trying to say that there's no choice involved. There is. But it's also something that's built and constructed for years, right? That makes it harder and harder to change because it becomes a habit. It's kind of part of your personality. And I've got to say, look, this isn't really to make excuses because I'm dealing with it. It's kind of hardwired eventually when you've been doing things this like any other work habits and just like processes that you have and daily routines. Once you've done them for almost 48 years, 48, eventually it becomes hard to change that, right? So very hard to change, but the way it's kind of come to me recently that at least the way I've dealt with it, and I don't know where you're at if you're a procrastinator, I see that there are 3 stages to this, okay? Which makes me hope, I've got some hope here that I might be on the other side of this in terms of dealing with it a productive way. The first phase, we'll talk about first here, is the one I feel like is probably least productive. It's what, our early life of when we become labeled a procrastinator and when we kind of consider ourselves a procrastinator. there's a certain element of shame there that perpetuates procrastination and makes it worse, right? So you know that procrastination is bad and you don't want to wait till the last minute. And you know you've got this big project to do, whatever that is. The knowledge of all that needs to be done and like, oh man, I'm a day behind now. I'm a week behind now. I've only got a few days left. The knowledge of this becomes overwhelming. And so that shame creeps in that you haven't done what you needed to do. So you start feeling bad about yourself. I could speak personally. This is what happens. You feel bad about yourself at that point. You feel this shame. And that's kind of critical to this, because in order to take that first step and start working on this thing that you know that you have to do, you need some inspiration. You need some motivation. And your motivation can't just be negative motivation, right? I need to stop being a procrastinator. That doesn't work. You're feeling bad about yourself. So you need inspiration and motivation to do this thing, whatever that is. But if you feel bad about yourself, you're just not in the position of inspiration, right? So this was basically me for much of my life. I mean, I think I long considered myself as a kid, through high school, even through college, a bit of an underachiever. And probably closely tied to the fact that I was a procrastinator. And I don't think I took pride in that. It just kind of was. It became a habit. So, this continued into much of my in-office work life. I would say I continue to do that same kind of thing. It's hard to break that habit. So it eventually kind of, becomes a part of you, unfortunately, as that habit. And it's just kind of, okay, well, this is how I do things, right? It's become, and it kind of takes us to where we're going to go next. But yeah, it's this perpetual cycle when you have that shame, because we're not at acceptance yet. It's become a part of us, but we don't feel good about it. And you're beating yourself up about the fact that you haven't started this thing. You know you have to start this thing. You're feeling really bad about yourself, and you're continuing to put yourself in this bad position and putting that thing off because of this lack of motivation. And that because you're not going to get that motivation, that inspiration, without first feeling good about yourself to get started. Right? Need a quick drink, because otherwise I'm the only one talking here. Cheers. I have to take bigger drinks when there aren't many breaks. So the second phase, what kind of procrastinator am I that I've actually defined this to a point that there are 3 phases? I don't know. Second phase, at least that I've had, is acceptance. And I think it's funny because if you were to go back and listen to podcast episodes, pubcast, when John Robinson was interviewing me, there was an episode, and I might have even done a couple of episodes, where it's like this light bulb went off when JR asked me, maybe this is part of your process. The procrastination is part of your process. And I was like, yeah. And maybe I'm super productive as a procrastinator. And then to me, it was almost like, oh, I've got a great excuse, right? But, it's not entirely bad, because now it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to embrace this label as a procrastinator. Not going to feel terrible about myself. And actually, I'm going to say instead, it's going to be like the opposite. I'm like, I've got 3 weeks to do this thing, and it's not in me to start it right now because I won't be inspired. My work won't be as good as if I wait till the last minute, and during that time when I know how much time I've got left. I've got it down to a science. I know how much time I've got to get everything done and do it well. I will be motivated. I will be driven, because that's the day I have to do it. and I'll do it well. That's phase 2 of acceptance, where you convince yourself, hey, this is part of my process. This is who I am. Not only is it who I am, I'm more productive potentially as a procrastinator with that fire driving me last minute. And now there's an issue with that, of course, in that if that's your process and you embrace it, that you will get burned, right? Life happens. Last minute things come up. You haven't started that thing yet, and then your internet goes out and you only got a couple hours left. Would be a good example. I wouldn't say I was significantly burned by this over the years, but there were absolutely times when it was like, it would have been better if I would have gotten started earlier, because this thing came up at the last minute that I was not prepared for. So phase 2 is acceptance, which isn't necessarily as good as it sounds, but I need another drink. Bottoms up. So phase 3, look, we got to deal with the burps. Phase 3 is basically the middle ground here, right? So in the first phase, we kind of know it's not productive, and we feel ashamed about that. Phase 2 is kind of going to the extreme to, it's like, that's who I am, and actually trying to say, hey, I'm more productive as a result of that. Phase 3, I'm making this all scientific, right? Someone's going to write in and tell me I'm a moron. But phase 3 is that middle ground. It's kind of accepting that this is something you're dealing with. Knowing that you can't beat yourself up about it. That's kind of what acceptance was all about, was like not beating yourself up about it. But also realizing it's not helpful, right? You're taking enormous risk potentially by consistently putting things off and procrastinating. And you could be better. But that risk, you're going to get burned. You may get away with it over and over. And that's kind of where I was for so many years. I got away with it over and over and over, to the point where I was like, but why do I need to get this done early? Everything went great, right? Or especially you like turn in the paper and get a good grade that you just wrote during the night, that kind of thing. That's the way I was. But I think the issue, and again, I don't know if I'm just talking for me or for you as well, the combination of procrastinating and not being particularly organized. And let's be straight. I'm super organized at some things. Like as a baseball coach, I was super organized. A lot of my life, I am not super organized. I don't typically keep lists of things to do, and map things out and outline stuff and all that, right? So if you're in acceptance mode of this is just who I am, I procrastinate, and you're not organized, that's kind of the perfect storm for where you're really going to get burned. Because you almost kind of need a little piece of you that's, I'm not going to say shamed, but it's like, warning, we should probably do something about this, right? So I was realizing that in this phase 3, that procrastination, it does make things harder. But I also need to kind of accept and give myself some grace. Accept that, I procrastinate. And it's okay. Like, we're not perfect. I think it's just something that I deal with. And forgive myself for the fact that, I procrastinate. But, because of this procrastination, I'm making it harder on myself potentially as well, which is no good. All right? So it's this middle ground. It's an acceptance. It's a realization that it's not good for me, but it's also not shaming myself about it, because if I do, I lose the motivation to do it. So it's part of who I am. That's okay. I want to make my life easier, right? It's kind of like, okay, this has to stop. I've got to be better at this. So for me, yeah, it's really all about organization. I'm not super organized, but we have to be at least a little organized. So there's nothing worse than a disorganized procrastinator. Honestly, that's where I was especially at during, I'd say, a good, I don't know. Well, it's a disorganized procrastinator I've always been, but to also be accepting of it and think it's almost like a strength, probably not the best. But so what I also don't want to do is micromanage things. What I mean by that is like being organized. Oh man, I don't know about y'all, but so like my wife is the most organized person I've ever known in my life. And I'm often extremely jealous of it. So it's not only that her memory, she remembers everything. Her to-do lists, she has everything scheduled out. She knows what she has to do and when, calendars, you name it, right? That, to me, is overwhelming. Just even thinking about that. Like if I start putting all that stuff into my calendar and onto lists, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for me because there'd be so much that I'd be overwhelmed by it and would all just become noise, right? So that I don't respond well to that. So to me, again, everyone's different. I'm not someone who sits down and maps out, and like JR, this drove him crazy. I do not respond well to trying to map out like a 5-year plan. And, step by step outlining, what this is going to look like, within a month, within 6 months, within a year, within 5 years. Nuh-uh. My brain just doesn't think that way, right? So we don't need to go that far, though. We need some middle ground. So, yeah, I mean, really, when I start planning like that, or someone tells me to, I just kind of glaze over because it's just I don't think like that. I don't think that's an excuse. I just don't. I don't embrace it. But what I can do, though, right, is think about what I can do today and maybe even this week in terms of small steps. So instead of getting overwhelmed by this big project that I know that I have to get done by X date and all the stuff that has to be done and that I haven't done, we can plan to make some small progress today, because really today is all that matters. The super organized people will say, oh no, we got to map this out. You can, knock yourself out. But at least doing a small task today is far better than just being overwhelmed with the entirety of what needs to be done. So let's simplify it, right? And not only that, let's make it as easy as possible. So we're going to break this project into simple tasks, and yeah, you can outline it a little bit if you want to go that route, right? But make sure that these are very achievable. I mean, almost stupidly achievable tasks, because again, we're feeling good about ourselves, not going to shame ourselves that we haven't started. We have a list. Like this is something that I've gotten better at. Again, not big, just overwhelming lists. I've got a whiteboard now that I keep going. Honestly, it's just like thoughts. Like I have ideas for a video, I'll write it up there. Ideas for a blog post. I even have a couple of like quotes that I heard that I really liked. I'm not like a big inspirational quote guy. And then I'll even have like today, I'll have like a couple of items there that I need to do. And the Apple Notes, I also will update occasionally, like, okay, I've got to do these 3 things. And keep it super simple. When we're talking about this overwhelming task that's ahead of us that we don't want to procrastinate on, it's like little things, man. I mean, I'm going to read 10 pages of this book. It sounds ridiculous. It's like, yeah, 10 pages, you can knock that out like that, right? I'm going to write one lesson of this training. And that's honestly something I'm dealing with right now. I've got this, it's become a bigger project than I had anticipated. It's 41 lessons, ton of work. And I hope everybody's okay who prepaid for it, because it's just so much work, and that has overwhelmed me. And it's not so much that I'm procrastinating at this point. It's just like so much to do. So I'm going to do one lesson today. I'm going to write a paragraph summary about this project so I could take this step forward. And I'm going to email that, to my team. Just something that's super easy, that first of all, you do it and you feel accomplished and you can cross it off. I think that is the best thing. Like when you can cross things off your list instead of it just sitting there, feel accomplished. But you know what? You might end up doing more than you had planned because you were inspired to do it. And part of that's because you set it up so that you could be inspired, as opposed to like, I've got to do so all these things that it's unrealistic to expect that I can do that today, the next few days, etc. So the biggest obstacle, though, and the reason why we want to keep it simple, is just getting started. I don't know about you, but for me, when I get inspired, all of a sudden I can just take off. And like, I can write a bunch, I can record a whole bunch of videos, whatever it is. But without that inspiration, you can't just tell me record 5 videos, right? I've actually got to be inspired and feel good about myself in order to get to that place. I don't know if you got a drink in front of you. I mean, can I throw that down? Let's see what I can do.
Last call.
I've asked the bartender for our tab. I'll take care of you today. I've long wondered if I should get a sponsor for this show. It's actually a brewery, but we don't always have drinks on the show. But man, Oscar Blues Brewery, you are welcome for the free advertising. So that's all I got today. Not super long, but it's something that honestly I've been thinking about more as I grapple with procrastination. I know that I've got a lot of people close to me that deal with it too, and I just want you to know that you are not alone. But I think it's really important to acknowledge this relationship between feeling bad about yourself because you're procrastinating and how hard it is to get started as a result of that feeling. So part of it is kind of acceptance, but also giving yourself grace and being kind to yourself. But you've got to move forward, and so make it very easy for yourself to move forward. And that comes down to coming up with some sort of process, little list, something to get you moving. Because oftentimes all it takes is just a little spark, right? I think a lot of us work that way. That's all I got today. So thanks so much. If you found this helpful, please, if you could, wherever you're watching or listening, subscribe to the pubcast. Throw me a bone. Throw me a review if you want. But also, we've got a lot going on. So make sure to follow me at johnloomer.com. I am everywhere on short form video right now. When I say everywhere, I just got started on Pinterest too. Seriously, Pinterest. So you can find me. I want to help you. I got a lot of free stuff out there. Reach out though. Let me know what you think. If you've got some topics you want me to cover, hey, if this resonated with you, whatever. info@johnloomer.com. Hey, screw that. John@johnloomer.com. No H. You know how it goes. Spell it right. Thanks again for joining me today. Until next time, do awesome things.
I'm out.